the AI space, especially MLOps, then you might have heard of the MLOps community. It's a globally spread community. So today I have is the co-founder of this community, Demetrios. Hey Demetrios, how are you doing? And can you tell us where you're joining us from?
I am in a small town. I think you could even call it a village, right outside of Frankfurt, Germany.
Okay, nice. And how are you doing today?
Yeah, things are good. It's a sunny day here, which we don't get a lot of. So I
Mm.
just got back from the pool and I'm enjoying the day.
Nice. Awesome. So are you ready to get into all the fun questions I have prepared for you?
Yeah, of course. I'm usually the one that's asking the questions. So
I
now it's going to be
know.
fun to get the tables turned.
That's awesome. Oh, cool. Okay. So I love asking this question to anyone who has been in AI space for a while now. So I'm going to ask you too. What are your thoughts over generative AI? Do you think is it more hyped or is it worth the hype?
Mm, So I have a position on, I think Transformers are overhyped. Generative AI itself, I've seen some really cool use cases with it, and I think people have been able to figure out ways to incorporate transformers, specifically like transformer architecture, specifically LLMs, into their products. But the notion of like, oh, it's going to change fundamentally how we interact with the world, I think that's a little bit outrageous to say the least. And so you can see really brilliant uses of LLMs and AI, generative AI right now. But for the most part, thinking that it's going to go like all the way towards the next boom of the internet, that is where I start getting a little bit weary.
Hmm, makes sense. And do you think like the people that are afraid of, that it's going to take their job, do you believe that?
Right. So I think not necessarily taking jobs, more so the people that understand how to use it well
Mm-hmm.
can really do some advanced stuff. And the funny part about this is that it's not necessarily technical people who are leveraging it to the maximum capabilities. I think some of the most advanced users or some of the people that I've seen get the highest ROI from LLMs are marketers and salespeople. And so that's really fascinating to think of because we're spending all this time as engineers trying to incorporate LLMs into our product or trying to create like a RAG chatbot.
Mm-hmm.
And how much ROI does that actually give us? It's
Mm-hmm.
debatable. But then you have a marketer who's doing like programmatic SEO and using AI to help research and write different web pages. And so you get very clear return if you see the web traffic go up and you see the inbound leads go up. You can track that back to, oh, well, that was when we started using LLMs to help us with our marketing efforts.
Cool. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Do you have any favorite use cases that you may have come across, like favorite real life use cases rather?
Yeah, I think the best use that I've seen. So in general, I think anytime you can use LLMs to help you like auto populate forms. So you give it basically you give it a long document and then it helps you auto populate a form that you have to fill in. That's a huge time saver. I really like that just because it makes things a little more convenient for the end
Mm.
user. There's a company called Feathery, I think, and
Okay.
they do like very complicated documents. Basically, the company is almost like Typeform on steroids. And so it's Typeform for like the financial institutions who have to
Mm,
be asking their clients or their fiduciaries how all these really complex tax questions and financial questions. And a lot of the times, what the founder told me is that the answers to that stuff has already been documented and created in a form, whether it's like a quarterly form that they have to fill out for the SEC or it's a yearly form that they have to fill out. And they've filled it out for their accountants or their advisors. And
Mm,
then you get all that information in a document, but you have to continue to fill out forms because from what I've heard, the forms that you fill out in the financial sector, it's basically endless.
yeah.
And so what they're doing is they're tackling that by saying, "Hey, just give us these forms that you already created or these documents that you already created. We'll search through that and then we'll populate the form and you can look through it and say if it's good or not."
Yeah, I think I can relate, like, filling the forms, especially when it comes to immigration visa applications. I'd love some,
Mhm.
like, agent do it or an LLM that I can populate. Just fill it for me. It's annoying.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay. So, talking about all the hype and how people are using AI, do you think since more and more people are boarding this AI ship, are we heading in the right direction of, say, evolution of technology?
Yeah, I get the feeling things I like the fact that there is a lot of energy in this space. I do think that we probably are going to need some kind of different breakthrough than the one we have. What it feels like is like we've got this cut and we're just putting a band-aid on things with the transformer architectures and people saying like this is going to take us to AGI because we just need to throw more data and more compute at the problem and then it's going to be this super intelligent uh, being, borderline being that is now able to do anything and everything. And for me, I just intuitively feel like that's probably not how it's going to play out. But of course, I don't know what the future has in store. So take this with a grain of salt. I do think that we will need some type of a breakthrough on the model architecture level or just like some deeper breakthrough that is not around right now because again going back to this band-aid analogy with all the engineering efforts that are happening right now like first it was rags all right that
Mm.
helps with the mitigate hallucinations or get us better generations and then it's like well rags are good but you know what's even better than that is a graph rag
Rat rag,
and
yeah.
that's going to help us mitigate hallucinations and all of this. And for a while, it was like, oh, let's fine tune it, or let's now it's just all throw it into the context window. And so for me, it feels like we're playing Twister a bit and getting ourselves into these contortions just because the underlying technology itself doesn't lend itself well to what we're trying to do in a lot of these cases.
Yeah. And speaking of all these new technologies and tools that are coming up every single day, how do you stay up to date on the recent trends in this space?
So I enjoy, obviously, like I have the social media diet, but I
Mm.
try to limit myself a bit to that. And I'll do LinkedIn, Twitter, Hacker News. I spend a lot of time on the community Slack, as you can
Mm.
imagine, the MLOps community Slack. And that helps me keep a finger on on the pulse to know the feelings that others have and if people are asking questions what kind of questions are they asking what kind of answers are they getting. Mm, and that is a really nice way to do it but then occasionally I'll read papers and occasionally I'll just read in general but I read books too like there's some really good books that are out there on different subjects around ML usually and data engineering because that's what I fancy more these days. I just feel like the AI stuff, it's really hard to write a book today about
Yeah.
anything generative AI or AI design patterns and have it continue to be relevant maybe in like a year or
Yeah. Mm.
say 5 years. So I'm trying to read stuff that doesn't go out of style that quickly.
Mhm. Makes sense. Do you have any, like, the most recent book? Do you remember the name of the book that you might have read most recently?
For sure. I'm reading Joe's book, Joe Reese, The Foundations of
Mm.
Data Engineering, I think, or The Fundamentals of Data Engineering. Can't remember which one it is. Fundamentals of Data
Okay.
Engineering. And I like to do that. I mean, there's also a lot of great blogs,
Mm-hmm.
engineering blogs, I should say. I've got a list of my favorite engineering blogs that I really respect because I think they continuously put out high quality material, and they also are a little bit more transparent with how they're doing things. And it's usually at these big companies like the Ubers or Airbnb, Meta, that type of
Mm-hmm.
thing. But one hidden gem that I think everyone should be reading more of is the Newbank engineering blog. Their blogs are just like top notch, and I am always thoroughly amused when they put out a just quality piece of engineering blog.
So, what do you like about that blog the most?
I think they're very pragmatic in their approaches, but they explain things thoroughly.
Okay.
They also talk about the challenges. They're not like, "Oh, this was it and this is how easy it is to get started and we just did it with the snap of a finger." They will talk transparently about what they went through and why they went through it. And then you kind of see in a lot of engineering blogs the general rule of thumb is like, here were the design principles that we used,
Mm-hmm.
and here's how we went about executing that, or here's what we did to follow these design principles. And so they'll do that, but they also will go a little bit more into detail than your average blog. So that gives it like a little bit more into technical detail, I should say.
Got it.
So I
Mm-hmm.
always feel like I learn a ton from them.
And what was the name again? The New Banks, you said?
Nubank, NU, not NEW,
Okay.
NU Bank.
Okay.
And I think
Got
they're
it.
based out of Brazil. Yeah.
Mm,
So
sweet.
even more kudos to them because I imagine a lot of the people that are writing the blogs, English isn't their first language.
Me too.
There you go.
Awesome. Okay. So referring to your social media diet, so I referred to one of your LinkedIn posts you wrote a couple of days ago. So just basing my question on that, why do you think most AI companies are service companies getting product valuations?
Yeah, this one I was kind of kicking around in my head just after talking to so many friends and colleagues and people out there that have products that they are launching, and they have clients and they have real revenue. But at the end of the day, the clients really would be happy with them just being a consultant or
Mhm.
almost like a an engineer for them, because the real know-how that these people bring to the table is their ability to find like the most relevant retrieval if they're building some kind of a RAG chatbot. And the platform is less important, but most people have a platform, and I've seen a lot of the same types of platforms out there. Like a lot of people that are creating the same tool and slapping on different names for it. And so that's what it felt like is, all right, there's a lot of these same platforms. These platforms are getting business, they're able to grow, but is are they getting business because the companies just need someone who is a very advanced engineer and can understand what is going on with AI and how to architect AI? And so then it's almost like, hey, I'm going to hire you, and it's just part of the package that you bring your platform because you're most comfortable on that. Now, I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing though. This is the beauty of putting out ideas on the internet and getting a lot of people to tell you their opinions on it. I'm not convinced that that is the worst thing in the world, because by doing that, people are able to, these platform companies, they're able to see what is the most important piece that they need. And also, it's like the engineers who are setting up their platforms are getting real world experience. They're getting reps in the gym, or they're getting more at bats. And so they're seeing that, okay, this is something that keeps coming up. We should add that to the platform.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, when I read that blog, when I read your post and the comments, I'm like, this is just, I need to ask because I didn't fully understand at the time. I'm like, okay, I gotta ask you this on the podcast. But yeah, thanks for explaining
Did
that.
that clarify it though? Does that make
Yeah,
sense? All right. Yeah, because
yeah,
sometimes
definitely.
in my head it's very clear, and then when I write it, it's not. But because when I write it, and sometimes I don't make the strongest argument or the best points, that's where the internet can jump in and make very strong points against what I'm trying to say. And
Fair
so that's
enough.
fun. Like I love learning from others, and that's half the reason why I put things out there and
Yeah.
try to say, "Hey, here's what I'm seeing.
Hmm.
Or is anybody else seeing this? Am I
Yeah,
crazy for seeing this or thinking about it this way?"
yeah. That's always a good way to get the feedback. Um, cool. So speaking of learning from others, when did you first think about building the MLOps community with your co-founder?
Yeah, so it came up, and the reason I say that we have co-founders in the MLOps community is almost like because everybody in the community was founding it. It's not like the community is of one person, really. I just
Hmm.
am almost like the shepherd, and it's everyone's community though. And so it's not like it can be mine or someone else's. But the reason that it came about was in COVID, I was working for a company that was doing MLOps tooling, and the company was having trouble making sales and getting people on the phone when COVID kicked off. And so the CEO kind of nonchalantly said, maybe we should try like a community. And he came from the Docker world. And so it was very much in his blood. And everybody was like, yeah, great. That sounds awesome. And then it all fell on me to execute. And so that happened for, I think it was like 3, 4 weeks. And then the company went out of business, but the community was growing rapidly. And in May 2020, I was trying to apply for a lot of other jobs, but nobody was really hiring at that time. I don't know if you remember in May
I do.
2020, it was a little bit rough.
Very, yep.
And so I just said, all right, well, maybe I'll try and do this community thing. And I remember the coolest day was when I had stopped reaching out to people on LinkedIn, because at the beginning of the community, one of the ways that I was getting people into the community was just reaching out constantly to people on LinkedIn and trying to connect with as many people as I could, and then tell them, hey, I've been stuck inside. I started this community, thought you might want to join. And so people were receptive to that. But at one point, I stopped reaching out to people, and I still saw that there was a slow trickle of new community members that were coming into the community Slack or joining the weekly calls. And so then I realized, like, oh, hey, maybe there's something here. Maybe there's actually like people are really valuing this, and it's growing by word of mouth, not just by me spamming people on LinkedIn.
Mhm. Yeah, that that's a good one. I did not know the origin story of MLOps community. It's good to know. So, how do you see people making use of such AI communities like yours?
I think the people that make the best use of it are the ones who are actively asking questions
Mm,
and creating relationships and going to the events or being part of the events. And so you can get a lot from the MLOps community by just hanging out in the Slack and never
yeah.
asking a question and never giving any answers. But you are probably going to get more if you are being active. And also, I think I should probably preface this with each person that comes to the MLOps community comes for a different reason. And so I've learned that over the past 4 years that some people are coming because they're looking for a job. Some people are looking to hire ML engineers. Some people are learning and they have to get something right now because they're making system design diagrams and they have to figure out what the best choice is. And others are learning because they are a student and they want to come into this world, or some are coming at it from a different background, like
Mm-hmm.
someone who's a data engineer and they're coming into the ML engineering field, or someone who is an SRE and now they want to get more into machine learning and AI. And so trying to figure out, I think, first of all, figuring out like what your motive is for coming into the community. Is it because you want to meet like-minded people? There's plenty of ways that we set that up. Is it because you want to learn? There's plenty of ways that we're trying to make sure people can engage that way. And you want to learn, like, what do you want to learn? I think is the other thing. So having all those questions very clear and clearly defined. And also for me right now, it's if I know better the reasons why you're coming into the community, then I can also help
Mm,
better point you in the direction on how the community can support that. So some people come in because they want to raise money. Some people come in because they want to give people money. And so some people come in just to like meet others, and you get all these different paths that people can take and people interface with the community with.
right. So maybe the next question I have is kind of related to what you already mentioned, but for the people who haven't heard of the community or who don't exactly are part of any community per se, for example, why do you think such people should get involved in these AI communities?
Yeah, I feel like it's going to significantly, so if you're coming for learning, it's going to
Mm,
significantly leapfrog you on the learning phase because you get people who have probably done what you're trying to do. You can talk to them and you can ask them questions directly. And you could also try and do that with ChatGPT, but for this field, uh, sometimes I think it falls flat, and especially if it is for the most advanced techniques
mhm.
or the most like cutting edge stuff, it may or may not work. But so you've got that if you're trying to learn, and you also can sanity check your ideas, or you can get social proof if you're thinking about choosing one tool or another. You can see and hear experiences of people that have used those tools and what they liked, what they didn't like. And so then you're better informed when you go into the meeting and you try and pitch it to your boss or your executives or your higher ups, whatever it is. If you're coming to network or if you're coming to get a job, it, it will also, I think, streamline the process if you are able to engage thoughtfully and if you're able to engage. Yeah, I would say it can streamline just about any of these different roadmaps. And that would probably be the biggest boon that the community can offer.
I totally agree with you. I do see a lot of importance of community and just being involved in it, being part of multiple communities. I can say it with confidence.
Mhm.
Um, cool. So You mentioned that you were living in Frankfurt, and I know that you have done a lot of work in that part of the world. So you must have seen like the crazy AI and startup culture in the SF Bay Area when you were here. What is the scene in Europe when it comes to AI and just like the whole startup world?
In Europe, I think it's a little bit more reserved. I know from friends who have started companies here and also companies that have already been going, it's harder to raise money in Europe, so that
Mm,
makes it so that the ecosystem is smaller
mm,
and you don't get as much of that. Like in San Francisco, it's a little bit to the opposite end of the spectrum, right? You
yeah.
can kind of like at any coffee shop or cafe you go to, you're going to encounter
Yeah.
engineers of every type or people that are working in tech. And so sometimes that can be too much. But in Europe, you've got in general, and it's hard to paint like broad strokes because there's always those edge cases. But in general, I would say it's a bit harder to raise money, so you don't have as much energy and as much of that, like as much resource to play off of. Although I like to hope that it's getting better, and you see big statements from the EU, like we're going to invest in our tech ecosystem. But when you compare that to the amount of money that's being invested in the US and
Mhm.
San Francisco, it's like a drop in the bucket.
Ah, yeah. Still lots to go, lot of steps to go to, I think.
Mhm.
Um, as if, yeah, you're right. Sometimes it's a little too much, but on the same hand, it's like I love that energy here.
Yeah.
Everybody in tech and thinking tech. But yeah, it can get too much and create fatigue
Yeah.
of a sort. Cool. Okay. Last question for you. I know the AIQCon, which I attended recently, it was wonderful that you guys organized. Hats off to all you and all the managers and volunteers who supported. Um,
And you for helping out
ah,
so much
of
too. That
course,
was
it
huge
was
help.
absolutely my
Couldn't have
pleasure.
done it without you.
Thank you. Okay, so will we have another AIQCon and when?
So there will definitely be another AI KubeCon. When? I don't know yet.
Yeah,
I'm trying to get over the PTSD of organizing this last
I
one. So
can't. That's why I wanted
it'll
to keep like the best question for the last because I remember seeing you and the other managers like, yeah, there's it takes a lot to it was a
yeah.
very good event. So,
Yeah, we had a blast. The funny thing is that I asked for feedback and we got the
mhm.
feedback forms, and it's really cool to see that people have been active in sharing their feedback. What is hard is trying to decipher that feedback because some people say,
Oh,
"Oh, these talks were no good," and then others people will say, "I loved those very same talks." The same talks that the some people said, "Meh, wasn't that good." Other people are like, "That was my favorite." And so it's hard to please everyone,
oh
obviously,
yeah, yeah.
but yeah, we're looking for certain patterns that are emerging and we're
Mm.
seeing obviously it was the first one. We learned a ton. We could have done so many things so much better. And I thank everyone that came out for their patience and like believing in us on this first time. Because yes, we have not done this a ton. Obviously, we've mainly been doing meetups and
Hmm.
virtual conferences, and now
Right.
this time it was a in-person conference. It's a big jump, but I'm glad we did it. I'm glad that it took a lot out of me for it. Also, if we're gonna do it next year, or like when we're gonna do it next year, I should say, we're gonna plan much more in advance because we only did that one in 4 months. We put everything together.
Oh. Wow.
And so that was a big crunch. Every day was kind of like from 9 in the morning till 9 at night, just thinking about how we're going to make it the best event we can.
Yeah, that 4 months. Wow, you pulled it off and that big of an event in 4 months. That's great, man. Really good. You got a good team. I must say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was
Awesome.
lots of great help from the volunteers too. I can't
Absolutely.
stress that enough.
Cool. Okay, this was a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed talking with you, Demetrios. Thanks so much for
Enjoyed it.
accepting my invitation and coming on board my podcast.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate you inviting me on here. I feel honored.